I've decided to continue my journey into discovering more metal bands from the Netherlands. I already did one video on this country that was based on a Google search. But this time I've taken your request from the comments section of the first video. I will do it the same way I do all other videos in the series. I'll give you a little background. I listen to one album from each band and I will give you my thoughts. So let's get into it. First band I have is Epica. I originally didn't choose the band for the first video because I was familiar with their last two albums, but somebody requested it, so I thought maybe it would be a good idea to listen to their debut album, The Phantom Agony from 2003. Basically, this band was started by the guitarist from After Forever, which is a band that I covered in the previous video. His name is Mark Jansen, and he started the band. He got together with vocalist Simone Simons, and this band is pretty different from After Forever. I would say the thing that makes them stand out is they both use death growls and symphonic metal elements. Vocalist Simone Simons sings in a soprano style and Mark Jansen does the death growls. This album was pretty much what I expected. It was typical symphonic metal. I would say similar to some of the early Nightwish albums with Thrash. But like I said before, the big difference was the death growls. It was a good album. It had a few longer epics and some short songs, but it's definitely a band that will eventually do a deep dive into their discography and possibly rank. I'm interested in listening to the rest of the albums. The next band I have is The Gathering. This is an interesting band because their early stuff is very different from their more modern albums. I decided to listen to their debut album called Always from 1992. Given that it was more of a death doom type of sound, but also very unique, which I'll explain. The music features lots of keyboards as well as distorted guitars and heavy bass guitar sound. At times they use heavy synth. It sounds like a video game soundtrack from the 80s. But there are also some heavy guitar riffs and galloping rhythms. The vocals are low guttural vocals. The lyrics are easy to understand. Lots of tempo changes. The music's very different. It's unlike anything I've heard before. Music also sounds very gothic at times, and it sounds like a soundtrack to a horror movie. I'm interested in listening to this band more. I remember the Green Man channel talking about the album Mandy Lion, so I'm going to have to listen to this band some more. The next band I have is Heidevolk. They are a folk metal band from the Netherlands. Their lyrical themes are inspired by nature, the history of Gelderland, and Germanic mythology. Most of the lyrics are in Dutch. It's an interesting band because I was familiar with their last album called Houwitser, which was released in 2023. But it's not one of those bands that I remember and then I had completely forgotten about them. I usually don't like folk metal that much, but there's something about this band I like. I think it's because they incorporate heavy guitar sounds and it doesn't sound too folky all the time. I also decided to give their 2023 album another listen. I remember the song Drink Mit de Golden Valhalla. I remember the music video for this one, and it shows guys doing cosplay with swords. The song was very catchy. It has both acoustic guitars and electric guitars. It sounded like traditional heavy metal. The album is really good. It has lots of songs with fast rhythms and chugging guitars. The guitars are also very melodic, and they play these medieval folk-sounding melodies. There was another song that featured these chanting vocals, which sounds like warriors getting ready to go into battle. Overall, I like it a lot. I would even say it's probably my favorite folk metal band. Next is Carach Angren. They are a Dutch symphonic black metal band. They founded in 2003, and there are two members. They were from the now defunct bands called Inger Ingolia and Voltage. Studio albums are concept albums. The lyrics are based on ghost stories and folklore. It's black metal in the style of a band like Cradle of Filth, which I know a lot of black metal fans don't even consider them to be in the same league as other black metal bands like Dark Throne and Emperor. I listened to their most recent album called Frankensteinia Stratamontanus, released on June 26, 2020 through Season of Mist. It's a concept album inspired by the late 17th century, early 18th century German occultist Johann Conrad Diepel, and he did these controversial experiments with corpses, which allegedly inspired Mary Shelley's 1818 Gothic novel Frankenstein. The music features lots of spoken word parts, a very theatrical sound. It's a type of black metal that doesn't sound very menacing. Sounds like you're listening to some type of horror movie. But with that being said, it still has many elements that are characterized by black metal, like the blast beats and rapid-fire guitar riffs. Vocals are also similar to other black metal bands. There are also times when they sound more like an industrial band. It's definitely a good band to recommend to somebody who has never listened to black metal before. If you want to ease somebody into the genre, I think this would be a really good band for that. Next, I have a hardcore band called Born from Pain. The band has been active since 1997. I listened to the most recent album from 2019 called True Love. I would say it's hardcore, similar to the type of music played by the band Hatebreed, so it's more metal than punk, if you know what I mean. I would even say they sound close to thrash metal at times. The vocals were very reminiscent of Jamie Josta from Hatebreed. It's a short album. It has 12 tracks, it's 30 minutes long, has uplifting lyrics that are just meant to pump you up, has that very 90s metal type of sound where there are parts where it sounds like they're even doing some rapping. It's a pretty cool album. I don't have much more to say about it. Basically a mix of hardcore punk and thrash metal, so I would check it out. The next band I have is Within Temptation. They are a symphonic metal band. They've been around since the late 90s. They formed in 1996, which is actually the same year that the band Nightwish formed in another country. I'll be honest with you, I've never listened to this band before. I remember they released an album in 2023, but I didn't bother checking it out, so I decided to listen to it for this video. And that album was called Bleed Out. I understand this band has gone through many changes in terms of their sounds. I will have to do a deep dive into their discography one day, but for now, I'm going to talk about the new album. In terms of the music, there are elements of symphonic metal, gothic metal, metalcore, and djent. The lyrics are related to war, oppression, women's rights, religion, bullying, and inner struggles. What sets the band apart from other bands like the aforementioned Nightwish is they have a sound which uses more of those down-tuned guitars, in addition to keyboards and the female vocals. Let me also mention that the female vocals have more of a pop sound as opposed to being very operatic and theatrical. So for that reason, they sound like some other modern metal bands. Overall, not too bad. The next band I have is Howitzer. They are a brutal death metal band. The band formed in 1997. They have 6 full-length albums. I listened to their most recent album called Sentinel Beast. It was released on March 8th, 2024. This one flew under my radar when it was released, probably because it came out the same day as Invincible Shield by Judas Priest. I thought it was a pretty solid album. It had an old school death metal sound, very reminiscent of Cannibal Corpse, lots of fast-paced guitar riffs, rapid-fire drumming, deep guttural vocals. There's also this groove element to the sound, and the songs change up the rhythm many times. Sounds like the death metal of the late 80s, early 90s. There were times when it sounded closer to thrash, which was most notable in the songs where they slowed down the pace a bit. They never really went too slow though, with one exception. There was one song that was close to the end of the album. That was just really like the first minute of one particular song. It's pretty good, just basically meat and potatoes, old school death metal. I think they are worth a listen. The next band I have is Textures. They are a Dutch progressive metalcore band. The band formed in 2001. They released 5 albums. I listened to Phenotype, their 5th studio album released on February 5th, 2016 through Nuclear Blast. The album was recorded at the same time as another album called Genotype, which was set to be released in 2017. It was going to be one of those albums that was meant to be a double album but released like a few months apart. But unfortunately, the band broke up. That album never saw the light of day. As for the music video, they sound the same as they are described. They have a very aggressive metalcore sound, but the music has complexity to it. They add some keyboards and other sounds, and you can hear the progressive element in the changing rhythms. They have clean vocals that complement the music and sound closer to rock music, as opposed to some metalcore bands that sound like emo. I'm not the biggest fan of metalcore, but I like this one a lot. I think the progressive element made them stand out. I hope they get back together and release that one album that was left on the cutting room floor. Next is Blind Justice, and they're listed as a thrash metal band, but the sound is pretty unique. They formed in 1989. They have 3 albums. I listened to their last album, Lost in All, from 2006. It sounds like 90s thrash, back when the time when thrash bands would experiment and either go into a groove metal direction or towards alternative rock and new metal, and this album is basically all of the above. That's not to say I didn't like it. I am a big fan of 90s metal. There are times they sound like groove metal of either Pantera or Machine Head. Vocals are very different. It sounds like they belong in a post-punk band or something, or maybe even Faith No More. Other times they sound like an alternative hardcore band like Helmet. There are times they sound like that rap thrash, which was one of those short-lived genres of the 90s, something like the band Biohazard. Overall, kind of band that some metal bands or some metal fans might not like, but I like the fact that they were very different and unique. I have one more band. It's someone who's pretty well known. It's Vandenberg. They are a heavy metal band named after the guitar player Adrian Vandenberg. The band has an interesting history. They released 3 albums in the early 80s. Then they made a comeback in 2020. They released another 2 albums. I was familiar with their last album from 2023 called Sin. It was actually one of my favorite heavy metal albums of that year. I decided to listen to their self-titled debut from 1982. This one had a minor hit called Burning Heart that peaked at number 39 on the Billboard Hot 100, not to be confused with the Survivor song of the same name that was also a big hit and also used in Rocky IV during the montage scene, which is also one of my favorite montage scenes of the 80s. But as for the album, it's straightforward arena rock with heavy metal influences. The music was melodic. Sounds like a precursor to many of the hair bands that would be coming out later in the decade. It was pretty cool. I guess it was considered heavy metal for the year it came out. It was a mix of power ballads and hard rockers. So if you like that kind of thing, I recommend checking it out. That is all. As always, give me more recommendations for more Dutch bands. I'm sure there are plenty of others that I missed. Check out the other videos in the series. I will stick them on the screen right around there. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. I will see you in the next one.